Welcome to all to this special session on SDG 16. Dr. Lin is no stranger to our team. She is the president of ProHam, Society for the Promotion of Human Rights. She is also the deputy president or chairperson for the Society for the Promotion of SDGs. Now you must know that the Society for the Promotion of Human Rights and the Society for the Promotion of SDGs have the same founding people. That's why the names also sound similar. Okay, because it's Persatuan Promosi Hak Asasi Manusia or Persatuan Promosi Matlamat Pembangunan Lestari. So both promosi. Now, we actually got Dr. Lin to do a resource material, which is something she's going to use today. And it's also a resource material that we are launching. It's entitled SDG 16 Resource Materials, SDGs and Human Rights by Dr. Lin Mui Kiang. Organized by ProHam, funded by APPG grant for the promotion of SDG awareness training by My SDG Academy. Actually, very nice cover of the book and the material. This is intended to be a resource material. Wait, let me show it up. Intended to be a resource material for training for awareness. Because in SDG, most of us are focused on poverty, inequality, gender empowerment, and various other issues, economic, social, environment. SDG 16 has actually been neglected in many ways and underemphasized. So when Dr. Lin wrote these materials and I got all her materials together, I felt, and so shared with Zoel, put a nice cover, put a contents page, and compile it from page 1 to how many? 220 pages. So these are resource materials that can be utilized by capacity building people, can be utilized by staff. You can even use it for reading and material. So we then thought with this sort of a simple launch, because it's more a soft copy that's being distributed, we thought it would be good if Dr. Lin gives a talk to the core staff. Some of us are actually over the top with this meeting because we are fighting deadlines to finish 2024 program details and the manual. But others of you are able to listen. And this is important because I thought it would be good for the constituency staff as well as the solution staff and the capacity staff to pick up some materials. This would be recorded and so we can utilize again. And some of us need to step out for a few minutes and then we'll come back again because we couldn't finish one material just now for discussion. So this is the material, and I think on behalf of our group here, we thank Dr. Lin. We sort of soft launch this material.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your interest in SDG 16, and thank you for spending the afternoon here with me. So we are going to speak on SDG 16, and actually the paper I've done is like almost 100 pages. So what I can do now is to provide you with an overview of what is in the paper, and then we can hopefully have a discussion later on. So as we know, the SDG started in 2016, but due to the slow progress, the UN SecGen issued a global call in 2019 for a decade of action to deliver the SDGs by 2030 through an annual platform. And the members include governments, subnational authorities, corporations, and civil society. And it is monitored by the high-level political forum, which Dr. Technician has gone every year. And I think Joel and Rama has also gone to those meetings. So, and a scientific assessment in 2022 found that the SDGs had limited transformative impact thus far because of their selective implementation without considering the complex interactions and cross-cutting issues and synergies between the different goals. And this year, it was found that only 15% of the SDGs are on track and 48% are off track, and 37% has stagnated or even regressed. So why is SDG 16 important? Including, according to the International Institute for Sustainable Development, failure to implement SDG 16 would threaten the whole 2030 agenda. It highlights SDG 16 as the cornerstone of the 2030 agenda. And it highlights that only political systems and institutions which meet the standards of SDG 16 are able to deliver all SDGs sustainably over time. And the term SDG 16 plus has also been coined to reflect the linkages between all SDG goals and targets. And it focuses on the 7 tenets of strong institutions that are being effective, inclusive, responsive, participative, representative, accountable, and transparent. All these are necessary for achieving the SDGs. This is true whether the SDG is related to education, health, economic growth, climate change, or beyond. And the success of all the SDGs rests on unlocking the full potential of SDG 16 to catalyze social transformation. And we have now passed the midway point of Agenda 2030. Much has been done and reported on the other SDGs, but SDG 16 has not yet been mainstream, and it is now very urgent for us to implement it, or it will negatively affect the achievement of the other goals. And the real challenge for SDG 16 is in its implementation. Multi-stakeholder partnerships, whole of government approach are necessary to restore trust and to strengthen the capacity of institutions to secure justice for all and facilitate transitions to drive sustainable development. Failure to invest in SDG 16 will risk worsening social dissatisfaction, injustice, exclusion, and will reverse development gains across SDGs. There is need for political will and good governance to achieve the SDGs, or they will be difficult, if not impossible, to realize. And as you know, SDG 16 has 12 targets and 23 indicators, and includes 2 means of implementation targets. And they are to strengthen national institutions and promote and enforce non-discriminatory laws and policies. Target 16.1 is to reduce all forms of violence. As we know, if there's violence, everything else cannot be implemented. There are deaths and atrocities in Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Ukraine, Gaza, West Bank, and other countries as a result of war and internal conflicts. For Malaysia, law and order is important to ensure internal security and safeguard social and economic well-being of the people. The main crimes in Malaysia include human trafficking, human smuggling, arms trafficking, money laundering, fraud, black marketeering, killings, flora and fauna crimes, non-renewable resource crimes, heroin and cocaine trade. And all these have been increasing over the years. And the recommendation, some of the recommendations I put in would include, it's related to like the IPCC, the Independent Police Conduct Commission Act, which was just recently passed this year. And this act really subverts measures for police accountability, and the establishment of an independent and effective commission that is urgently needed by the people. The IPCMC was recommended by the Royal Commission in 2006, but the police really resisted it. And then a compromise was made by the formation of the MAIC, which actually was to supervise and to oversee 20 overall agencies, including the police. And even that, the police is not happy, and a lot of civil society was fighting for the IPCNC, and they finally came up with this IPCC, which is not only watered down, it is like a washed-out version of the IPCNC. So, you know, actually, the IPCC should possess real powers to investigate and take concrete action against police officers responsible for serious abuses. But it does not have this new IPCC. It does not have the power to search and seize evidence, and the commissioners are appointed by the PM, and the secretary is appointed by the Home Minister, and it is placed in the Home Ministry. So actually it's all inside one department. There's no independent oversight, you know, and the scope of work should not be just limited to misconduct outside the review of the IGSO. Actually, this IGSO is under the Royal Police Commission, and it takes care of 100 over misconducts, which they should be overseeing and taking disciplinary action, but they never had. So if this 100 over misconduct are excluded from IPCC, then IPCC will have nothing to do. You know, so it will be rendered not only toothless, but useless. And the complaints that the public wants to make is to be made at the Security Division of the Ministry of Home Affairs and investigated by the police stations where the offences took place. So how is this independent, and how is this going to improve, you know, the situation of police abuse oversight? So how is this considered a reform? Because even when they were under MAIC, it was better in the sense that MAIC will, it has the power to search and seize evidence, and then but it has no power to prosecute. So it still has to send the complaints back to respective agencies for disciplinary action. But at least we know how many complaints were made against the police. So at the MAIC, about 80% of the complaints made to MAIC concerns the police. Now we won't even know how many complaints have been made, you know. So, and also the police should raise the quality of professional services, modernize and strengthen the organization. But more holistic strategies to reduce crime would include reducing poverty and improving neighborhood living conditions, changing male socialization patterns, expanding early childhood intervention programs, reducing incarceration for drug offenders. The next one, 16.2.1 is abuse and violence against children. So the reported number of child abuse is about 1,000 a year, but this is very underreported. It's just the tip of the iceberg because children do not know how to report. So this will depend on neighbors or other people who come across such abuse and they go and report. And those are very, very few in number compared to the actual number of abuse. And it includes all kinds of physical, emotional, ill treatment, etc. And the abuse that will cause harm to children's health, survival, long-term effect, physical, emotional health, and well-being. And physical abuse is the most common at 54.8%, followed by sexual abuse at 39.6%, and emotional abuse at 5.6%. And the most common perpetrators are biological parents at 30%, babysitters 26%, child abuse incidents also occur at nurseries. So it is really tragic that we have to protect children against their own families and caregivers, you know. And child abuse deaths are now at an alarming level. It is the second highest cause of child homicide in Malaysia at 22.9%. So some of the recommendations, as I said, this is just an overview. So if you want the details and statistics, you can read my report. Like these are like, I have about 20 over recommendations, but there's just a few here. To develop interagency protocols for coordination among child protectors, which include the police, healthcare, NGOs, welfare officers, private sector, and others. And then the social welfare department needs adequate funding and personnel for child protection services. And Ministry of Women should improve implementation of the National Child Protection Policy and mandate incorporation into all schools. And the Ministry of Women and MOE should educate children about their rights and maybe educate parents on parenting, because this is a huge problem and the main perpetrators are the parents. And Ministry of Women should establish a systematic fostering agency to provide alternative family for abused children. Ministry of Women can also set up child protection and recovery centers so that children can get treatment and recovery support before transitioning to children's homes. And the punishment for abusers probably should be increased. 16.2.2, victims of human trafficking. There is abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of foreign workers by both the public and public sectors. Malaysia has about 2 million legal foreign workers and about 4 million illegal ones. For many years, Malaysia was at the lowest tier 3 on the watch list of the US trafficking in persons watch list. And Malaysia has been upgraded to tier 2 for this year, with the US authorities saying that Malaysia has still not met the minimum standards, but is making significant efforts. So for this, the recommendations would be to increase efforts to identify trafficking victims. And officials should be trained on the SOPs for victim identification. Because a lot of enforcement, they just arrest anybody without a valid work permit. They can't differentiate between trafficked victims, migrant workers, illegal migrant workers, refugees, or whoever. So they really need to be trained to how to differentiate between these different categories, because trafficked victims are in a really very bad shape. And they should increase efforts to investigate and prosecute trafficking cases, including those involving complicit officials and forced labor issues, because there's a lot of corruption in this area. And also, the government should reduce prosecution delays, because a lot of prosecutors are not very clear on how to manage trafficking charges. And they should also increase judicial familiarity with a whole range of trafficking crimes, particularly forced labor. And 16.3, victims of violence. Domestic violence continues to be a big concern, with many cases going unreported. 2021 saw the highest number, involving 7,400, out of which there are 5,100 female victims and 2,300 male victims. Women are also at risk of exploitation of sexual abuse at workplace, public spaces, and online platforms, and trafficked for sexual exploitation. The Domestic Violence Act provides protection for victims, and there is a committee to address domestic violence and one-stop social support centers and also shelters for victims. In 2007, an integrated one-stop call center was set up to provide 24-hour hotline for victims. And recommendations will include the need to improve the authorities to improve their response to domestic violence cases and to ensure that perpetrators are held accountable. And the punishment under the Domestic Violence Act and the Penal Code are different. According to the Penal Code, anyone who causes hurt to their spouse can be imprisoned for a prison of up to twice as long as the maximum term for such offenses compared to that involving a third party. So it is more, the punishment is heavier for those who abuse their spouse. And then, of course, we need to collaborate with NGOs and other bodies to establish a nationwide support movement. And some have set up helplines and some have also set up safe houses. 16.3, unsentenced detainees. As 2nd February 2023, prison population was about 72,000, and 41% of them are pre-trial remand prisoners. And they were not even charged and they're already in prison. And 18.3% were foreigners. Prison capacity is 110, which means it's overcrowded. And immigration and customs held 29.6 thousand in detention, 63% of whom have no criminal record. Many more have only minor offenses, including traffic violations. So why are we arresting and housing all these people who are not even charged, or who are, who can easily be let off with a fine, like traffic violations? And the prison is overcrowded. And in 2022, 150 foreigners, including 25 women and 7 children, died under immigration detention. And undocumented foreigners are detained for long periods as they await deportation, while refugees and asylum seekers who do not want to return home are held indefinitely. And as Malaysia does not recognize refugees and has denied UNHCR access to detention centers, this is hampering efforts to release and resettle them. And as we know, detention centers are in very bad shape, and detainees have a very kind of a lack of access to food, water, and healthcare. And 16.3.3 is access to dispute resolution mechanism. We have the Legal Aid Department, which is funded by the government and handles certain criminal and civil cases, and the Bar Council and its offices across the different states. It is privately funded by members of the bar, and they provide legal aid for areas of family law, employment law, and criminal cases. And in 2012, the National Legal Aid Foundation was set up for criminal cases, and it started operating to cover the gap left by the Legal Aid Department and the Bar Council. However, there is lack of awareness. People still do not know that they can access legal aid or where to go and look for legal aid. And also there is lack of funding for all these three mechanisms. Target 16.4, reduce illicit financial flows. So the Global Financial Integrity Institute report estimated that Malaysia lost between 22.9 billion US dollars or 94 billion ringgit and 33.7 billion dollars or 138 billion ringgit in illicit outflows from 2006 until 2015. Some of the sources of illicit money are from trade misinvoicing, human trafficking, corruption, tax evasion, criminal syndicates, drugs, and smuggling. And Malaysia is number 5 among all countries in the world for illicit capital flight, after China, Russia, Mexico, and India. We are a very small country, and we're after all these huge countries. And but on a per capita basis, Malaysia ranks number 1. And Malaysia accounts for about 6% of total illicit flows out of all developing countries. And this large sum of money could have provided funds for sustainable economic growth, creating more jobs, reducing inequality, and addressing the climate change crisis. In 2016, the Panama Papers revealed that over 2,000 Malaysians, citizens, and companies have secret accounts in Panama, but the authorities have not disclosed the public the results of any investigation investigation, if any. And 16.5, reduce corruption and bribery. According to ML research, the loss to Malaysia due to corruption could be a staggering 4.5 trillion ringgit over the last 26 years. The cost of corruption to society is its profound impact on socio-economic life of the nation. Corruption also erodes trust to the public sector. In the public sector, it wastes taxes meant for important projects. It results in poor quality services or infrastructure or projects never getting off the ground. Of course, we know the 1MDB has been described by the US DOJ as one of the world's greatest financial scandals and the largest kleptocracy case to date. And the LCS, literal combat ship scandal, is even larger and has not even been brought to justice. Target 16.6, develop accountable institutions. Therefore, reforms are needed to reduce the concentration of power in the Prime Minister's office and the executive. And we need to improve fiscal management and make procurement more transparent. It's been estimated that about 30% of budget allocations each year is lost to corruption. So can you imagine only 70% left is really going to the projects? For the legislature, reform should be aimed at enhancing the role and autonomy of Parliament and the lawmaking process by giving more resources to Parliament and the establishment of the greater use of parliamentary select committees. And the PSCs can be used for major public appointments for agencies such as the Judiciary, Attorney General's Office, Election Commission's East Office, the Royal Police Commission, and the MACC to reduce the influence of elected officials on such agencies. Because currently, the chief executives of these agencies are appointed by the Prime Minister. So they answer to him and they obey whatever he says. So there is no such thing as effective, accountable, and transparent institutions because they answer to the executive. 16.7, representative decision making. In Parliament, women hold 15% of the seats in Dewan Rakyat and 15% in Dewan Negara. In the civil service, women hold 38.2% of decision-making positions of TUSA 3 grade and above. And women representation in the top 100 public listed companies is currently at 25.8%. However, the most important is representation of voters in Parliament is skewed due to the gerrymandering and malapportionment in the election system. Can I get rid of this bar? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So in the constituencies, 222 constituencies, some constituencies are very small, like with 40,000 voters. And some constituencies are up to 200 over 300,000 voters, which means the smallest constituency of 40,000 gets 1 MP. And the biggest constituency of 300,000 voters also get 1 MP. So how is that considered representative, in the parliament? So, and this has been going on under the 60 years of BN rule, and they have kind of keep on the gerrymandering and malapportionment until this extent. And the next delineation is due in 2026. So we hope that this new administration will have the political will to correct this situation. And 16.9 is on legal identity. In 2016, the Home Affairs Minister said there were at least 290,000 stateless children in Malaysia. And of course, there would be more now, and there are at least 10,000 people in West Malaysia who are denied citizenship, with an unknown number in East Malaysia. And those who become stateless in Malaysia are largely due to the lack of legal identification documents, such as birth certs or marriage certificates from their parents, gender inequality in our laws. Without citizenship, stateless people have no legal protection, no right to vote, and often lack access to education, employment, healthcare, registration of birth, marriage or death certificates, property rights, land ownership, job opportunity, and may also be at the risk of exploitation. And the current Citizen Act amendments, we have been hearing this 2 weeks about the amendment to the Citizenship Act, where the Home Minister wants to withdraw operation of law from stateless people, from permanent citizens, and so forth. And this will make the current situation much worse and cause a lot more suffering to our stateless people who are actually not stateless. It's just that, the Department of Registration is not facilitating anything. So imagine orang asli, orang asal, illiterate people, they are going to face much, much more suffering in future. So people are still fighting, NGOs, everybody is still fighting against it. But even the PM says, he says, oh, let the king decide. How can the king decide? The king will only endorse or not endorse. You have to give a very good amendment document for the king. So he's washed his hands off, and the Home Minister is doing all these things. And it is really a very big pity that he wants more stateless, our own stateless people to suffer forever, Yeah. Can you sit here?
Totally. Maybe the last line you can use before. The last line.
Yeah.
If you can't see there, maybe you can use.
I can't see so far.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you. So 16.10 is on cases of killing, kidnapping, and forced disappearances. There has been a number of enforced disappearances, including Pastor Raymond Koh, Azmi Chekmat, and Suhakam has concluded in 2019, after a public inquiry, Suhakam has concluded that both Pastor Raymond Koh and Azmi Chekmat were victims of enforced disappearances at the hands of the police special branch. It was the police who did it. But after the Suhakam report and all that, nothing has happened so far. And also at about the same time, Malay Pastor Joshua and his wife went missing, but there was no effort to find them. And there are other such cases. And there are also many cases of death in custody, 24 in 2022 and 46 in 2021. And there are many cases of torture in custody, but there have been no action taken. So, this is again related to the IPCC, which has now, it is now completely useless, commission. And also the Internal Security Act and SOSMA laws prescribe detention without trial. So even though they're not charged, they're not trial, they are still in detention, and some are like for years. They can keep on extending 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, forever. So 10.2 is on public access to information. The Official Secret Act was enacted in 1972 to preserve documents which are officially secret to the government. And the purpose of the Printing Presses and Publication Act 1984 was to control all types of publications, whether printed in the country or imported from abroad. However, in September, 2 months ago, the government agreed in principle to enact the Freedom of Information Act to create a guideline and parameters under which access to information from the government and public agencies would be provided to the public. And concurrently, the Official Secrets Act will also be amended. But then again, we come back to the guidelines and parameters. What will they be? Will they really provide access to public information? Or how still it can be controlled, Because like when I was in the government for 22 years, I use only green files which are solid and pink files which are trustworthy. I've never seen a white file. So, everything that we deal with are solid. So I do not know how they're going to create guidelines and parameters to provide access to such information. So again, we have to see how they work this out. And independent national human rights institutions. So we have one. Suhakam was set up in 2000 under the Human Rights Commission Act 1999, but has been considered toothless as its recommendations are not heeded, and it's been considered toothless by Suhakam itself. Because they feel that it's so futile, working so hard and nothing is heeded. Its annual report was tabled every year, but it was tabled in Parliament only twice, in 2019 under the Harapan PH government and this year. And their concerns include human trafficking, child marriage, immigration detention involving children, citizenship to children, and customary lands. So in fact, next month, Suhakam is going to hold a forum on the 10th year anniversary after the inquiry on the native customary land. They published this 10 years ago, and they really urged the government to do things about it, but nothing has happened, and they're just holding the 10th year anniversary to bring it up again. And I think that Dr. Dennison has been invited to speak, and I also be there. It is proposed that the act be amended to give Suhakam greater independence from the executive branch of the government. it should not be under the Prime Minister's office. In fact, it's under the law department. And commissioners are, appointed by them, whether according to who they think it's on their side. And that the nomination of commissioners be undertaken by a PSC under Parliament. And it is also needed, it also needs to strengthen existing laws to compel agencies to implement its inquiry findings. Because now, it can have all kinds of findings, even against the police, but nothing happens to all their findings. So they want the law to be amended so that they can compel agencies which they feel they found guilty to carry out, to implement its inquiry findings. And the 16.B.1 is discrimination. In the country, the decades of race and religious politicization and rhetoric has led to disunity among the students, discrimination, brain drain, capital outflow, and poor human resource development that negatively impact the development of the nation. And Malaysia is being left behind by our neighbors. It is therefore crucial to have an inclusive and participatory approach to development to counteract the destabilizing impact of marginalization and exclusion. So it is very urgent to implement SDG 16, as we have now passed the midpoint of the Agenda 2030. Much have been done and reported on the other SDGs, but SDG 16 has not been mainstream, and it is now very urgent for us to take it up seriously, or it will negatively affect the achievements of the other SDGs. To meet SDG 16 by 2030, action is needed to restore trust and strengthen the capacity of institutions. Without good governance, efforts to improve human well-being outlined in the other SDGs would be difficult to achieve. And in conclusion, SDG 16 serves as an enabler and accelerator for all SDGs and is key to achieving SDG Agenda 2030. Without peace, human rights, and rule of law, development gains are hampered or reversed. Without inclusion and access to justice for all, inequalities in poverty reduction and socioeconomic development will increase, and our commitments to leaving no one behind will not be met. So when we come back to things like strengthening institutions, making reforms, now, when we think of reformation or reformacy, we always think that it will bring about improvements and progress, and instead of regressing. But so far, we have seen IPCC, we have seen now the Citizenship Act, it doesn't speak very well about progressing. So, it's very worrying. And there is so much more to be done to implement SDG 16 to catalyze social transformation. We have a long way to go and only 7 years left. And we need to push harder and do much more. I know it sounds like, like we really have to take a deep breath and do a lot more. And so this is just a what we call overview. If you're interested to read the paper, it has all the much more details and statistics. So I hope you have some kind of idea of what SDG 16 is. Thank you.